China isn't invading Taiwan anytime soon, and the very idea is laughable. A lot of people think that Taiwan is a small island with a much smaller population that they couldn't possibly withstand an assault by China. The exact same thing was said about Ukraine 4 years ago, that there was no way they would be able to resist a Russian onslaught. And 3 years later, Russia can't even occupy 25% of Ukraine territory. Russia is landlocked to Ukraine. Ukraine used to be a piece of Russia during the USSR, which means there are roads, highways, railroads, easy access points to get from one country to the other, and Russia still couldn't take them. China has no such infrastructure connecting to Taiwan. In fact, the Taiwan Strait is one of the most unstable and dangerous waters to traverse, along with the fact that an amphibious assault is the most difficult one to pull off. And as mentioned by Chad Scott in a similar post, Taiwan has been stockpiling heavy weaponry for 50 years. You should watch his post on this issue. I'm going to put it in the captions. But another deterrent for China to never invade Taiwan would be the geopolitical, economic, and diplomatic consequences to the country. China is the world's largest food and energy importer, meaning that any invasion of Taiwan would most likely see strict sanctions on both, leading to a huge amount of destabilization hitting the Chinese economy as food and energy becomes that much more expensive. The United States and other Taiwan supporters would have to do very little. They would simply arm Ukraine even further so then Ukraine can launch more drone, missile, and airstrikes into Russia, disrupting the energy and food supply, meaning that China could not rely on Russia as the world's most well-stocked pantry. And as mentioned by Chad Scott in his post, millions of Chinese would lose their lives trying to take this island. This assault would not last a day, a few days, would not even be a few weeks. And a disruption to the Chinese food and energy supply, along with the loss of millions of troops and making the Chinese military look like a Potemkin army, would be a wound that China would not recover from for generations. And then every single one of China's neighbors that are actually touching them, aside from North Korea, would be helping the West. Even Mongolia, who is afraid of China, but has made very strong stands against authoritarianism. With the exception of North Korea, China has made false claims of land ownership of every single one of these abutting countries, with the exception of, I believe, Pakistan. Worst case scenario for Pakistan would that they would take a neutral stance but vocally support China, but that's it. Of course, you can't forget the dozens of US military bases all around China and Taiwan. Now, we would not be directly attacking China, we would simply be providing support to Taiwan in droves. Of course, China would be targeted with tariffs once again by the United States, most likely at 145% or more, and I bet you the United States would not be the only country launching these tariffs. If you've been following me for a while, you understand that China's economy is not doing that well, and this quarter, their industrial output, retail sales have dipped just because of US trade tensions. Imagine if that exacerbates to other countries. The economy is still going through deflation, which again, I've been talking about for years. And let's not forget, China gets to watch Russia as a real-time example for forced annexation and the after effects of it. You hear a lot of tinkies say that Russia is doing fine, but no country is doing fine when interest rates are over 21%. The government says that they are going to raise taxes. They have lost 1 million troops to either death or severe wounds in the war. China is much more economically developed and diversified, so maybe they wouldn't go through something as catastrophic as Russia, but they would still be set back and lose a lot of power. And let's not forget Taiwan's not-so-secret weapon. For those of you who are not aware, Taiwan makes the absolute best semiconductors or microchips on the planet. Nobody comes close. So the best tech in China, the United States, anywhere in Europe rely on Taiwan for these semiconductors to function properly. But if China manages to take Taiwan, then they automatically get access to these amazing semiconductors. Or do they? If you just read this headline, no, they don't, because every single one of these manufacturers in Taiwan are set to explode in case of invasion. If such a self-destruct were to happen, there would only be 4 places left on the planet that would be able to make these types of semiconductors. Actually, 3. There would be China. They have the oldest tech, which means they wouldn't have the most advanced stuff. Then it would be Japan, Germany, and the United States. The United States right now would have the most cutting edge advantage because of the factory being constructed in Arizona. If you add all of this up, it's just not a suitable recipe for success. And I know some people are saying, well, what if China isn't rational? Well, the Chinese government was rational enough to have trade talks with the Trump administration and reduce the tariffs down from 145% to what, 40, 45? So I don't think China is anywhere near as foolish as Russia. I am the Geo Husar. You should absolutely watch Chad Scott's post about this. Thanks for watching.